Somewhere.
Somewhere past the edge of convention.
Beyond the boundaries of tomorrow.
Lies a special kind of impossible.
A kind of impossible.
Where pioneers forge ahead.
Where no idea is too bold.
And no challenge too great.
Because making a 200-ton airplane disappear is impossible.
Until it's not.
Predicting cyber attacks before they happen is impossible.
Until it's not.
And solving the mysteries of the universe is impossible.
Until it's not. It's our job to break free from what is to what could be. Ready?
To leave the boundaries of what's known.
To define possible.
To define possible. To define possible.
To define possible.
To define possible.
To define possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, the panel will begin in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but have them ready to email or text your questions for the panel to askmetna@gmail.com. At this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage John Eubank, Vice President of Cyber and Electronic Warfare at Alion Science and Technology.
Hi, I'm John Eubank, Vice President of Cyber and Electronic Warfare for Alion Science and Technology. On behalf of AFCEA International, I'm excited to have the opportunity to introduce the panel on Information Advantage core tasks. This topic has been a passion of mine for nearly the last decade through my involvement in the big data platform here in the Army known as Gabriel Nimbus. Today's panel will deep dive on the challenges of building and maintaining an information advantage in the current data-centric warfare environment. This information advantage requires use of a joint force military capabilities to improve situational understanding through 5 main focus areas. First, enable decision-making. Second, protect friendly information. Third, inform and educate domestic audiences. Fourth, inform and influence international audiences. And finally, conduct information warfare across the joint all-domain operating environment. Moderating today's panel is Brigadier General Paul Kraft. General Kraft is a West Point graduate that interned in the House of Representatives before starting his tour in the Army. Over the course of the last 28 years, he has seen tours across the globe in tactical, operational, and strategic roles. As a contractor, I first crossed paths with General Kraft during his time at DISA Global, where my team built applications on the initial iteration of Big Data Platform in support of defensive cyber operations. Later, we crossed paths again in his assignments at both JFHQ Doden and US Cybercom, where he was instrumental in transforming the Joint Forces cyberspace operations and moved to the new Integrated Cyber Center and Joint Operations Center at Fort Meade. I look forward to hearing today's discussion, and I'm sure we will all walk away with new insights and understandings of how the Joint Force is creating an information advantage in today's data-centric warfare environment. General Kraft?
All right. All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me? I wasn't sure if it's on or not. Oh, there we go. It is hot. All right, well, first, thank you. I want to thank AFCEA and AFCEA's leadership for making this opportunity possible. Today, General Shea, General Wood, and Mike Warlick, especially, I know as a yeoman doing yeoman's work here, and the entire AFCEA team for all they've done in this incredible week and incredible event. I also want to take a minute and just and thank all the industry and the academia, the partners that we have and the partnerships that we have that we formed over many years, working with our current military and civilian teammates across the DoD. We know you're here for us, and we certainly want to do the best job that we can, and it is and continues to be about teamwork and unity. I guess first I'd like to put this panel in context within the TechNet agenda. Brigadier General Stanton provided an excellent opening to what we're doing with Information Advantage, and just really set the scene for us on day one. Followed by our very own Colonel Mike Hammerstrom, who for the Cyber Center of Excellence has been doing a lot of the integration and yeoman's work on the core tasks that we'll talk about today. And then the 1st Special Forces Command came in, General Angle and team came in and talked about that from an operational perspective. Yesterday we had General Fogarty really open up and give an excellent vision about where we were, where we are, and where we're going, again, from a big picture perspective. And on this final day of TechNet, we will continue the discussion about Information Advantage and provide a real, I'll say, a deeper dive into the 5 core tasks and their associated Information Advantage activities. And so I plan to provide some very specific verbatim language. And again, this is a concept that's being developed to be put into doctrine, so it's very important that we are driving quickly and deliberately toward this concept to be put into doctrine, and in order to get after and achieve decision dominance. So I plan to run this panel in 3 parts. The first part is really a scene setter, and I'll discuss the problem and where we are and how we're solving it. In the second, I'll introduce the team. We're in line, so core task 1 is on the end, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll do core task 5 on the team, and we'll talk about that. And then thirdly, we will take your questions. Okay, so first off, I'd like to just start with, I like analogies, and I apologize, but I like analogies. And I'll give you an analogy to where, we just had the Olympics. We just had the USA basketball team win again, right? I want to take you back to when we lost in 1988. And, that stings a little bit because, we like to win. Right, winning matters. I think our boss says that, and I agree. Winning does matter. And we, the U.S., and again, it is not lost on me that it's 5 people on the basketball team and 5 core tasks here. That's not lost on me. But we assembled one of the greatest teams, I believe it was the dream team of 5, many of the greatest players, many of them now all-stars, but 5 great players on that team. And Chuck Daly was their coach, and he brought in, he was really orchestrating the dream team. We're talking Bird and Jordan and Magic, right? Kind of as far as some of the bigs on that team. And he brought in a college team on the first day of practice, on the very first event that they had before they really started, and that college team beat them. And on paper, that should never have happened. On paper, we have individually all-star capabilities within the United States Army, within the Department of Defense. But what we aren't necessarily doing is working necessarily together as an integrated and synchronized team. And what Chuck Daly did as the coach was he established that you cannot necessarily win and win big, in which that team did every game. They set records. That team won big because they realized that they were better together, unified, than they were as individual all-stars. And so we've assembled an all-star cast. We're going to talk about the important branches that we have in our Army and the functions that we have. But most importantly, we're going to talk about how we are going to work together to create a condition known as information advantage in order to ultimately have decision dominance for our commanders, that they can make the right decision at the right time, at speed. That's what it really comes down to. And the basis for all this, the basis for teamwork, the basis for our Army and all that we do is certainly people and trust. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for letting me do that quick little vignette. But for information advantage, there we go. So I apologize. It's a little bit of an eye chart. If you're in the session, it's maybe a little bigger for you here. But I just want to walk through. We call it the logic map, and this is the basis of understanding of where we are today. And please understand, we're still at the conceptual level. Expectations. Some of these words, the verbs, the nouns, they may change. We are again working deliberately across the Army to get after it, but I want to just walk through a couple things with you. So, information advantage is the result of a more than a year of hard work and subsequent guidance from our senior leaders across the Army. The new approach for commanders and their staffs to employ all military capabilities for relative advantage over our adversaries and continually adapting and growing as we learn more about and how we leverage our imagination experience in this critical area of emerging military art and science. There's certainly science behind this, and the undergirding of much of what we do in the information space, if you don't know it, is the network. It will continue to be about the network and making that network be able to work together in order for this to flow properly. The Army's information advantage approach, as I describe it, is based. We had an event in February. I'll say it was a 3-star, 2-star, and some 1-star forums where we sat down in the Combined Arms Center and we established and agreed to this logic map. And then we farmed out the core tasks at the bottom to the various centers of excellence across TRADOC to work on and build out the doctrinal underpinnings to make sure that we're right, and then it all ties into ultimately a doctrinal publication that we'll work on. This also is not just about the functions that we have, because then form will follow function as we're looking at different formations that we can have within our forces of how we bring this together. So today, these core functions may exist in some level of maturity somewhere within our Army's operations. And I'll give you a truism. So how we are today in a division operations center and a core operations center is we have the signal G6 in the operations center, and we have the G2 in the operations center. We have a space officer in the operations center. We have the PAO is probably in the operations center. If not, they're with the chaplain, or whatever the case is. They're with the G1 there somewhere. We have a stow planner that's out there. We've got psychological operations officers. We've got civil affairs officers. We've got cyber officers, electronic warfare officers, all in that space. But they're all in different portions of those operations centers and not necessarily back to team play, integrating and working in a singular, I'll call it even the targeting process to work together as a team. Individually, they're doing great things, but we're not thinking about how we could work better together on if the PAO sends out a message. Was that message effectively received? How can we assess the impact of that message? Did that create mis or disinformation, in response to the message that we put out, which was clear and true and factual in all things? And then what should we do about that? Or likewise, our adversary creates multiple dilemmas for us by creating mis and disinformation or actions or activities that they may do in the electromagnetic space or on the network or off the network. And then what do we do about that, kinetically or non-kinetically? While we do have those individual parts, we need to have those synchronized and integrated in order to have the mass effect that we need to have. And it really does and ultimately come down to having that commander be able to see, understand, decide, and assess. We call it the SUDA loop that's out there going forward. If we don't have that, then we don't have an advantage. We have many disadvantages. We want to achieve dominance, but really the dominance piece where it comes in is going to be in that decision space. And so we want to provide all the ready and relevant information to the commander for the commander, again, to make the right decision. So in order for the Army to enable this, it not just isn't only for the Army, but it's also considering inputs and outputs from our joint and coalition partners, industry partners and things like that. So we've got to make sure that we're bringing in all that right information and coalescing it. And that's certainly where industry and academia comes into play. And we'll talk, and each of our panel members will probably talk a little bit about what we can do inside this space. So I just want to acknowledge that, I'll say, where we are today in this concept development, that we are moving deliberately toward an objective of having this done not in concept, but then in doctrine. And we have already had great success in various task forces that we have had over the last few years. If you've heard about the Information Warfare Task Force or the Information Advantage Task Force, those exist, but they're temporary in nature, where we have brought together various players, brought them in and shown how the power of just bringing in 2 or 3 core tasks made us even better as a force. So I will stop right there as kind of where we are, and what I'd like to do now, I got papers all over the place, is we will start with core task 1, enabling decision-making, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Whitskin. He's assigned as the Chief of a Network Integration Branch Mission Command Center of Excellence since 2011. I think I've known him the whole time, right? Back when I think it was Captain Kraft even. So in this capacity, he and his team coordinate, they synchronize, they integrate force modernization activities pertaining to the science aspect of mission command and its associated warfighting functions. Mr. Whitskin, go ahead.
Hey, sir, thank you. And what General Kraft just hinted at is that I've had a long association with the Army from a Armor Cavalry Operations Research and SAM's background, but really extensive experience trying to help the Army understand the art and science of mission command and how information technology and the network in particular enables us to make good decisions on a timely basis. If we have time for a sidebar, I'll drag you through all that history. But we have, for enabling decision-making, an extensive set of existing DOTML PF solutions. Mission Command, the Command and Control Warfighting Function, the Command and Control System, all very well documented across the board. But the times we face are new and particularly challenging, as we've been hearing all this week. Our adversaries are moving with great speed to adopt new capabilities. We are focused now rightfully on multi-domain operations and joint all-domain operations. That brings a complexity and an intensity that you can argue we haven't particularly prepared ourselves for. In some areas, yes, but to do things at the speed, the intensity, the comprehensiveness that we need to in the information age against peer adversaries, I would argue we're not there yet in many areas. And so this emphasis on information advantage is going to help focus us in those areas where we particularly have significant challenges. So what is enabling decision-making in this day and age? As laid out in the paper, it's basically number one, we want to enhance the quality of decisions. We want to speed the decisions that we make. We want decision cycles much faster than our adversaries so that we have decision dominance and, of course, the overall information advantage. At the same time, we want to assure our ability to make decisions. One of the first things, as already described in previous panels, one of the first things our adversaries are going to go after is, in fact, our ability to understand the operational environment and our ability to make decisions. So we have to preserve that ability by whatever means. So that's like the two components, is number one, improve our ability, at the same time, make sure we retain a capability in spite of everything our adversaries might be doing to us. So the interesting thing about this task is that there are human, technical, and procedural aspects to it. And our way forward has to be in all three of those areas. This is about teams of people enabled by information technology and networks, and now, increasingly, teams of people integrated with machines. and teams of machines that are enabling teams of people. And all of this is linked by our information technology, our command and control applications and services, and the underlying network. Okay, I just said a lot, I know. But this is what we're talking about, is these teams knit together by the network in very difficult and trying circumstances. Either just because of circumstances themselves, what we do to ourselves, or what the adversary is trying to do to us. So how are we trying to get after this? It really boils down for us in 4 lines of effort, which is really the integrated efforts of all the TRADOC centers of excellence and many of the cross-functional teams in really all the program executive offices and ASALT, and of course Army staff and our teaming with the JADC2 cross-functional team. And that's essentially number 1, unified network, which General Morrison laid out so well earlier this week. Secondly, common operating environment, which is that our applications and services are founded on a common data foundation and really overall on a common software and hardware foundation so that we can leverage these advanced tools that we're talking about, that we know we need, and that our adversaries are starting to use in quite a few areas. The third one is unified action partner interoperability. Already we've talked about mission partner environment and its criticality going forward. These teams of people I'm talking about, it is all of the services, it is our mission partners. And so at the data level, at the human collaboration level, and higher than that, it's with our mission partners, and we have to just fundamentally work that in that way. And then the last one, of course, is deployable, survivable, and mobile command posts, ones that will survive and effectively not look like command posts, not present that signature anyway, because we know those are primary targets. Our ability to conduct mission command and make decisions must be preserved. That is, in fact, a .mil-PF approach in and of itself. And part of it is not simply relying on all the technology that I've already thrown out as things we need. It is equally being prepared to operate with less than. What if you don't have the instantaneous flow of data that we talk about? What if you are disconnected in comms from higher and lower? Back to the basics of mission command, shared understanding, trust, understanding of the commander's intent. So that ability to continue the mission regardless of what the adversary is doing. And that is a technical approach for resiliency, but it is also a very human mission command approach to warfighting, which we think is just fundamental going forward. I will pause there. I'll turn things over to John so we can continue the discussion on the other tasks.
All right, thanks, John. I'll now introduce Colonel John Perrine. He is the Deputy Director of Operations for the G3 for Army Cyber. In this position, he is responsible for synchronizing, directing, and conducting operations for the Army's portion of the DoD's Information Network, Defensive Cyberspace Operations, and Information Advantage efforts. Over to you, John.
Thanks, sir. My name is Colonel John Perrine. A little quick background. Field artilleryman initially in the Army, targeteer by nature, became an IO officer where I was deployed with 1st Cav, 10th Mountain Division, and most recently with 18th Airborne Corps as the CJ-39 for CJTF-OIR. So a very operational background, a very information operations background, and now I'm the Deputy G3 at our Cyber with learning a whole new lexicon over the last year that has really expanded my mind into this world where I knew a little bit about it. I could spell cyber, I could spell the network, but I didn't understand the in-depth need for these things going forward and how our new world, it's amazing how we integrate all this together. And that's, I think, what's all about the concept of information advantage and getting to that condition of information advantage. The near real-time access of information across the world, the ability to process that information, as Jeff was just saying, almost anywhere at any time, and all this allows our military force to be one of the most dominant around the world. But in a sense, it also creates those vulnerabilities that the enemy is looking for. And so that's why that core task number 2, protect friendly information. It's identifying, securing, and monitoring and obscuring our friendly information, as well as defending the information systems that compromise or attack our information. It's interesting at our cyber, you guys may have heard General Fogarty say this, our four core missions that he sees us, our mission threads, is operate, defend, attack, and influence. Well, operate and defend, that takes up over 80% on most days. Some days a little bit less, other days a lot more of our mission and our bandwidth there at our cyber. Our cyber, we manage the Army's global cyber projection platform, and this enables the global reach of the network through cyberspace, and it enables us to be able to see ourselves, that's the sense, see our enemies, and that's the sense as well, to understand, to decide and to act, and to assess. So we have a dedicated command, NetCom, that does the operations and the main defense of that network every single day. They get after this weapon system, and we say it is a weapon system because it underlines all operations within the Army, from logistics and personnel management to the actual firing and sending in fire missions to the guns for artillery, or coordinating all the different C2 that needs to happen across the battle space. So it's really critical that we understand ourselves and understand the enemy and how they're trying to get at us to be able to protect those networks. The readiness of the Army is very dependent upon the network itself, and without that network, the soldiers cannot win on the battlefield. So we see Core Task 2 as being that NetCom at the enterprise level, and then at the tactical level, those G6s and those teams of cyber protectors working together to be able to secure and understand where we're at within that. Because the network enables the transport of the information, the data, and enables decision-making, the leadership, and the combat power. I want to say also that beyond just the NetCom and the Cyber Protection Brigade, which is critically important for the enterprise and the tactical levels of the network, it's the need to be able to see down to the lowest endpoint, and that's where we're having, that's one of our major gaps is across the board, is down to the lowest endpoint of the network to make sure that it is secure and that it is protected, as well as where our operations go beyond the DODN, go beyond our network, and how does that integrate in, and is that a threat or not, and we need to consider the risks in there as it moves along, and I see that as being part of Core Task 2 here, and integrating with Core Task 1 and the other core tasks, because it's a team. It's very much a team effort. And not only, though, it's not just defending the network, but it's also, Jeff mentioned this, and I think it's really important, it's defending in the electromagnetic spectrum as well, and understanding our own spectrum management and understanding what we're emitting out there and what kind of indications and warnings that's giving the enemy, and that's real key, and how do we control that, as well as protecting our just standard physical security. That's part of Core Task 2, amazingly enough, and OPSEC, Operations Security. That's something as an FA-30, it's near and dear to my heart. As much as I don't want to say it, it is near and dear to our heart, because Operations Security is more than halls and walls and OPSEC programs. No, Operations Security is protecting our information, and you can do this with integrating with the other core tasks. Military deception in support of OPSEC. There's great ways to drive cost, enemy cost at the enemy, so they have to work harder to find out the right information. And that's a key way that you could say, hey, Core Task 2 is integrating with Core Task 5 and Core Task 4, doing these type of military deceptions towards the enemy. So I see this information advantage, whatever becomes with the information advantage staff across the disparate staffs, as General Kraft mentioned, you have the G6s of the world, you have the IO officers, you have the PSYOP officers, et cetera. How are they coming together to integrate all these across, and how are they working with all the other warfighting functions, with the targeteers, with the protection cell, et cetera, as it moves forward? Because that is, especially the protection cell, that's critical to Core Task 2. And I'll just go ahead and turn over there, sir.
All right, awesome. Thanks, John. All right, for Core Task 3, we brought in Colonel Brian Fickel. Brian is the director of the Army Public Affairs Center, located at Fort Meade, Maryland. The Public Affairs Center serves as the proponency executive agent for the Chief of Public Affairs. It is responsible for the Army Public Affairs doctrine, organizational structures, training, education, capabilities, and policy. So over to you, Brian.
Thank you, sir. I'll go over Task 3. It's essentially inform and educate domestic audiences. We also play in Task 4 a little bit with inform international audiences. I won't get into the philosophical debate of the spectrum of inform and influence. Needless to say, our task is to inform the public. So I'll walk back kind of through my career a little bit. Everyone remembers where you were on 9/11. I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina as a first lieutenant, working in a one-star command as a non-school trained public affairs officer. And the concertina wire went up. We opened up the Media Operations Center at the golf course, and all of a sudden I'm running press conferences for a general officer to inform the public on what Fort Bragg would be doing. Two parts to our core task. One is timely and factual information. Think of that as traditional public affairs. We have growth opportunity with the second, which is correct misinformation and counter disinformation. So I'll get into that in a bit. Fast forward, I kind of bifurcate this as pre-2015, post-2015. So, 2008, 9, 10, 11 in Iraq, at the 3- and 4-star headquarters, we're still informing the public on what our activities are in Iraq. 2013 to 2016, I'm at CENTCOM, and all of a sudden we're experiencing something new in the inform and educate task. We're experiencing something new with ISIS. We're seeing propaganda and disinformation rapidly accelerating through information platforms like Twitter and Facebook and others. And we're trying to grapple with that. We're really grappling with how to counter this propaganda and disinformation. So we do some things there at CENTCOM. Actually, we do some things pretty well there on the fly, figuring this out. And we actually start learning how to team with other partners in WebOps and IO and MISO. And we actually started to figure that out pretty well as a process. And we brought capabilities together, and we got after that problem set. Then in 2015, we had the ISIS issue, and then Russia enters the picture in Syria. And we experience a whole different type of disinformation. With ISIS, we're seeing propaganda, heavily really for recruiting and things like that. But now we're seeing Russia enter the picture, and I'll give one quick vignette. We're observing the Russians provide close air support to the Syrians in an outpost in Syria. They get a little close, drop some munitions, and create a casualty event. They kill some Syrian soldiers. We observe this, we see it, we're watching the information space in the public affairs office. We start seeing messages come out from Russia saying, hey, there were no Russians in the area when this happened. And they're observing the information environment, and they're seeing us not react. They're seeing us not do anything about it. So day 2 on RT, now we're seeing interviews, and we're seeing experts talk about how they saw coalition aircraft in the area. By day 3, they had full 20-minute segments up, giving us complete credit for killing those Syrian soldiers because 2 A-10s were flying low and dropping munitions. And if we would just work with the Russians, deconflicting airspace, maybe this wouldn't happen. In our process, we're trying to declassify information and get it out to the public, and we run into an interagency issue. We don't want to poke Russia. So we have some of those things to figure out. But this was our first real delve into actual state-on-state disinformation. That's 2015. It's now 2021, and those adversary disinformation techniques and capabilities have only increased. So our second part of our core task is correcting misinformation. That's easy compared to countering disinformation. The two tenets for that are speed and credibility. And for us to get there quickly, we have to operate through the pseudo loop, sense, understand, decide, act, and assess rapidly. Right now, we need help in the sense and understand. It's going to require data. It's going to require a material solution that covers all information advantage as a condition. But we all need a common platform in order for us to rapidly go through that sense and understand together. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brian. All right, covering Core Task 4, we have Colonel Joe Pishock. Joe is currently, PhD, Dr. Joe, if you want to know. He is currently the director of SOCOM's Global Networks and Services and responsible for delivery of SOF, unique communications in DoD's 4th largest network. Over to you, Joe.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thank you, sir. So yeah, we bill ourselves as the 4th largest network, 24 time zones and 80,000 users, and that was a great setup, Ryan, because First SF Command on Tuesday, did a very neat description here of core task number 4, influence the international audiences and inform the international audiences. And that's really what 1st SF Command summed up. And so I'll summarize their points here in a second, but in previous Army assignments, whether it was as a Division G6 in the 25th doing Pacific Pathways, or most recently as a NETCOM brigade commander over in Korea, we would run across these exact same kinds of challenges every day. Trying to figure out how you could move, as you said, at the speed of a tweet, as opposed to the orders process. And it wasn't always adversarial. Sometimes just look at your own experiences out there with COVID. Cutting the daily frago that takes a couple of hours to generate, or putting it out over some kind of other platform to inform an audience. But in this case, it's an international audience. And so back to what SOF does, and doesn't make us any better, but this is maybe the contribution to the Joint Force, where we help out the big team, is as stated by 1st SF Command, that this is a core competency for us. We're out there every single day. Our network, technical network, goes across all the time zones because SOF is persistent. We have theater special operations commands, they live there. Or we have component forces that deploy in every day. And so we're always out there, and we're encountering these challenges already. And we've already encountered them, so I think we're able to develop some of these lessons learned. And so what are we doing across the globe? We're trying to build the human relationships, because these human relationships will build the trust that will ultimately lead to effective teams. It's nothing new. But it's changing quickly because of this information environment that Brian just described. And so he gave a vignette from 2015, and that might have been based around a kinetic scenario, but it's really not that different if you're an ODA that goes to any country, anywhere from the Philippines to South America to Europe. You are not only looking to amplify your operations by means of doing this well, but you're also a target and a vulnerability by your very presence. And something that we all struggle with, if you've sat around the kitchen table with your teenager, does information technology actually help you enable a human relationship as you try to have a conversation with your daughter while she looks at her phone? So there are some struggles that we face within the management of human relationships and the technology that we apply or that we've got to counter. And I don't give you any solutions to it. I just know that we're out there every day trying to build human relationships and then really contending with an information domain. So since we've gone over that, I think what I'd like to bring out is some of the technical points and the technical aspects, especially that are appropriate for this audience. And basically some of the lessons that we're already learning. So 1st SFC, they use the axiom, and we've all heard it, by, with, and through. And they use that term to describe their navigation across the human terrain. But what we're finding for SOF is that we need to also go by, with, and through local networks, World Wide Web. So while most of our efforts are confined, we'll say DODN within, we're already operating and have been out beyond the DODN. And so that presents a whole other host of challenges. And if we can be successful, beyond the DODN, we're also trying to be successful at a threshold below that of conflict. So if successful, we don't need to be in conflict. If SOF is successful, because we're doing this well, we keep it below the level. So it doesn't contradict any of the things that we're doing as services. It complements, but it's at a lower threshold. So at SOF, the SOF operators, they make contact at an individual level. And it's often over mobile devices. It's often by use of third-party applications. And it's beyond the walls of the DODN, which presents a host of challenges. Challenges to policy, security, challenges in cyber intelligence, network operations, and others that we can explore during the Q&A. But that's also where SOF can help the entire team, because the frequency and the scope of the operations are many. And each one of those is a vignette that we can all learn from. Because as stated, we've got theater SOF that's out there every day, and deployments that are almost constant at small scale and high levels of iteration. So thank you very much. and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thanks, Joe. And I'll bat in the 5 position. So I'd like to talk about information warfare. So just from what are we talking about? This is where we are talking about non-kinetic and kinetic effects inside the information dimension of the operational environment. Specifically, who the actors in this space, by and large, are 2 entities. That is our cyber warfare officer, our cyber warfare population, and our electromagnetic population that we have in 2 spaces. So inside the cyberspace, it's the cyber mission force. We have both offensive and defensive teams aligned and assigned in and through Army Cyber that are both operationally and strategically focused, but then also have capabilities that we can now push. It's an organization known as the 915th Cyber Warfare Battalion, and that can now be pushed down into tactical formations, think BCTs, divisions, and corps, to create effects at that level through the authorities that rest and still reside with Army Cyber and U.S. Cyber Command in order to do that attack and actively defend mission. We, the Army, are also rapidly increasing the amount of electromagnetic warfare formations and personnel today. So October 1st will mark an inflection point in our Army where we, even within the schoolhouse, within the Army, we've been presenting to the Army about 180 electromagnetic warfare specialists a year. And those are presented in formations that are being built out over time. Every brigade combat team, every combat aviation brigade, every division, every corps, every ASCC will have a combined team of both cyber warfare and electromagnetic warfare specialists, 17 series specialists in those formations in order to create planning capabilities to have both electromagnetic effects locally or request effects from Army Cyber that they can have effects in and through that space. And we're going from 180, and then starting in October, where we'll be presenting 500 a year. And so you're going to see an exponential increase because of the number of formations that we're building out, because of the capabilities we want, due to the gap analysis that the Army did several years ago, is to fill that gap of having organic electromagnetic warfare sensing and defensive and attack capabilities inside each of our Army formations. And that's a big part of being able to realize all the things that we're doing. Currently, it's CEMA, cyber electromagnetic activities, but we see it as more going forward as we integrate with the capabilities within what the MI and SIGINT community have, what our civil affairs have from a PSYOPers have, what our public affairs have, our signal corps have, and certainly, ultimately, and the whole purpose is for the commander to make the right decision at the right time going forward. And so, and that's really how we see the integration of that core task of DODNOPS, DCO, and OCO from a cyber perspective, and electromagnetic sensing, electromagnetic protection, and electromagnetic attack working together with the other 5 core tasks. So that's the warfare portion of this. At one point in time, just so I'll say where we are in the explanation of this. At one time, we thought that information warfare was at the top. But I think we've got it I think it's in a much better place now, because there is so much more inside this space that doesn't get after the crisis and conflict of what we do, that we've got to make sure that we have, that we are doing deliberately across the entire continuum of competition, crisis, and conflict. And then, as our goal certainly is not to go kinetic or non-kinetic, but our goal is to be able to have the commander have the right information at the right time and to be able to sense that environment, understand it, and move forward. Again, that is core task number 5. And so what I'll do now is I'll stop our second phase, and we'll go into the third phase. And I've got a couple questions that we have that we'd like to talk about. And the first one, and again, I want to recognize the great audience that we have. And I also want to thank the panel, because we were actually up here also, if you don't know, we were playing bingo. And the bingo game was who's going to say cloud, AI, ML, quantum, zero trust, whatever the case is, like the laundry list. So don't worry if we haven't said it yet. We're about to, okay? So I'll go ahead and I'll open it up, and this will be an all play. So the first question to our panel is, how can industry help your core task get after the mission sets and the activities that you have within? So I'll go ahead and I'll just fire it down to core task 1 to go ahead. Thanks.
Hey, sir, thanks. So ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, we are focusing at the Mission Command Center of Excellence on how we leverage data. You've heard all week, data centricity, data as the center of gravity, et cetera. So we are very much looking at how do we employ data analytics to include, going after the bingo, artificial intelligence and machine learning, leveraging cloud computing, all that good stuff. But we need help in understanding how we can best apply tools to enable the quality of decisions and the speeding of our decision cycles. I would say this is actually a multi-echelon question, right? You can think about this at the individual soldier level, the individual platform level. If you're going to think at the formation level, that's actually combinations of individuals, but it's not just the individuals, it's the collective understanding, it's the collective decision-making that occurs within those formations. You think about Joint All-Domain Command and Control, that's actually combinations of formations and echelons and services and partners. So that's another level of not just complexity, but collaboration by more humans across more organizations and countries. And then the last thing we're really trying to think through is the resiliency piece. How do I work my flow of data? How do I work the supporting computing and transport, et cetera, so that we can continue to make decisions and continue the mission in spite of anything the adversary tries to do to us?
I'll start just going right off of the data problem, and that's the ability to secure that data at scale throughout the cloud and then where else it resides within the network. With the proliferation of all the different IT technologies, the different, the new soldier of the future system is going to have so many different systems that connect to a larger system at the platoon level, to a larger system at the company level. And how is that going to be able to operate and protect itself at its local level in case it gets cut off through electromagnetic warfare or something along those lines? And then how is that data as it moves from the squad level or the individual level all the way up, or the platform level all the way up, how is that going to be protected as well? At the endpoint, at every single one of those endpoints, how do we maintain, I'm going to use another bingo term, a zero trust type of architecture that is able to, that we don't have to work at it at the human level, and the machine learning can do that for us or enable it as it goes along, and yet maintain flexibility to the commanders so that they can still get the job done and not have to work through paralyzing their own networks with this constraint of the architecture itself.
Awesome.
So we're working very closely with Cyber right now on an initial capabilities document to create a material solution for SUDA, Sense, Understand, Decide, Act, and Assess. The other part of that is the public affairs thing, which is acquire, process, and deliver imagery and messages. So we need a common operating picture dashboard that all information players use that can rapidly sense and understand the information environment, put a big red bell up for us saying, adversary just kicked off a disinformation campaign, here's what they're trying to do, here are the actors, so that we can rapidly get to a decision that incorporates cyber, PA, IO, MISO, all of them, decide, and then act and deliver. And part of future public affairs counter-disinformation act and assess act is it can be bot hunter programs and things like that. So we will deliver traditional means, but we also have to do things like go after the bots that they're using. And then the other layer underneath that is acquire, process, deliver. We need to, on the friendly side, pull in all of our visual imagery to include weapons camera footage, and everything that we have in our arsenal needs to tie into this system automatically so that when we do deliver in real time, the stuff is already there. We've already masked the weapons camera footage, and we can deliver it in real time. We saw with we saw this work well in CENTCOM, and I'll just keep it very brief. But that's what we need: a material solution that we all use commonly to do the SUDA and then the acquire, process, deliver. Thank you.
So where can industry help? And here's where we're already seeing it for SOCOM. Commercial intel that goes beyond the DODN. So what am I describing? It's kind of strange to think that you could take, if the 5 of us up here were deploying to Colombia, we'd be able to go to the intel guys and they'd say, stay in this hotel, shop in this store, eat in this restaurant, avoid these other places. But when we go up and say, what network should I use? That's a really hard question to get answered. And so just trying to ping the system and put pressure on ourselves to get that answered is proving challenging right now. It's a gap. And so it looks like we've got a lot of the right things in place, but it's making the system work to give that to us, because it can't be deliberate, it's got to be quick. It doesn't need to be a 179-day process to get this intelligence, because people go everywhere all the time. The military members and government in this room, you've got a phone in your pocket, and if you go on an overseas trip, should somebody give you an assessment of what that means, or maybe make an assessment when you come back in? So we're already seeing that that's a gap, and I appreciate the industry partnership that we're already getting to work on that. Please mow is better on this one. But it creates another problem. Once we get that intelligence, we have to be able to see ourselves beyond the DODN, and so network operations has always been a struggle. So getting ourselves, finally fixed to where we can see ourselves and assess that every day, but then looking beyond it. Because the term, sir, we have not hit is cloud, and now that we're moving into various commercial clouds environments, Yahtzee, okay, so we've finally gotten to see ourselves, but now I go over some commercial transport to a commercial provider. What's my ability to see into that? Because there's definitely commander expectations that when something's not working, they can turn to a SIGO and say, SIGO, why? So we have to be able to see these things in order to have an informed opinion. And then make those, more importantly, make the risk decisions that go across these different networks. Because that will bring about, I suspect, definite policy conflict. As we look to write policy for things that are inside the DODN, I don't ever want to see, a high risk to position location information versus how SOF needs to make contact, which is at an individual who needs that position location information to get from the airport to his hotel. And so the threat versus the risk has to really be determined. A lot of hard thinking, which policy doesn't necessarily account for. And so that'll just continue to be a grind, and we'll need that industry partnerships there along the way to help us deconflict between the threat of things and then what the commanders can actually then determine as risk decisions within that space.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right. And for Core Task 5, this is where we get into we're always certainly competing inside this space, inside the information dimension of our operational environment every day, whether we are in Iraq or Afghanistan or in a stated conflict space, or we're in the U.S. and we're dealing with mis and disinformation and challenges certainly inside that space, where this isn't just an Army problem, it's certainly a DoD and a whole of government issue that we've got to be able to get after. Where we are is we could be leading that charge going forward with a lot of capabilities that we have. But I see just from some challenges where we need industry support inside the attack and defense space. I'll actually start where I left off, which was electronic warfare. Based on the threat at the unclassified level, we certainly need to be able to sense out further than we currently can with the capabilities that we have today. And I'm talking about transitioning from equipment that's currently operational need statements to programs of record, and that those programs of record, which would go out to all those combine the aviation brigades, the brigade combat teams, the divisions and corps, that we have the capability to sense at distance the proper distances that we need. And again, hopefully some of you were able to attend our classified session where we talked about some of this. That's a big deal, because all that we're doing here for the Department of Defense to fight and win our nation's wars, that's why we're here, is we do that based on our threat. And so you've got to understand where we are in our fight, or in our ability to operate, defend, secure our networks and what we have in the information domain, on what our adversary is capable of doing, and therefore that we also have that equal or greater, we want greater, capability, that in order for us to electromagnetically sense that environment at distance, at great distance, whether it's on land, sea, or air, our ability to protect ourselves at instance in the electromagnetic space, that we can see the space that we're in. We know how we are emitting. We know who is friendlies that are emitting and who our adversaries are, and we can quickly, at speed, make that determination as we go from sensing to shooting in the electromagnetic attack space, that we can also attack at distance. It's one thing if we can sense out very, very far, but if we also can't attack at that same distance, then I'll say not as valuable to us. And so that is certainly, from our industry, that is a technical challenge that we have to be able to solve. And whatever that we can talk about it in another session, the distances by which and through we have to achieve. Okay, and we need your help to get after that. Again, we're not just talking from the Army, land's perspective, but also from air and sea, and then the ability with all those sensors within the Department of Defense to be able to bring those things together. I know we're working on that, keenly. I know General Parker's here, talked about it too. From a JADC2 perspective, is how do we bring all those things together? And the first thing we're really going after and attacking within the Department of Defense is really sensor to shooter, and all those things we've got to do. And so that means data standards and data tagging, data oceans, whether it's cloud, cloud or hybrid cloud. We've also got to make sure that as we sense and we get a line of bearing on our adversary, that 8-digit grid, when it goes into our data lake, that it's the same 8-digit grid when it hits our firing system, that is assured, and the 8-digit grid did not somehow get changed or modified or mutated, so we are firing at the right target at the right time. A lot of this is something that we're not going to people our way through. A lot of that capability we're talking about, we have to tech our way through it, and we're absolutely, leaning on you, asking for your help and support to get after that. Again, it's about trusting our data, the storage and transport of our data, that we know it's the right information at the right time. And again, it always comes down to not only trust, but then the speed, I'll say the speed of trust. And I'll say, I'll kind of go to, it's also about teamwork. And Joe, actually, you hit on it, was we have a lot of information. In many cases, you could argue we don't lack data. We have so much sensor data that's out there, but it's the ability to collate, because everything is a sensor. We talked about many years ago, soldier as a sensor, and all those things, but every computer to us is a sensor. Every cell phone to us, DoD, cell phone is a sensor. How are we censoring that? Where is that data going? Is it data falling on the floor? Are we collating it somewhere? How much do we have to store? How long do we have to store that data in case we have to go back and forensically look over time? And we've got to be able to solve that dynamically in order to be able to give the commander back all the way back to Jeff Whitskin and mission command for the commander's purpose, because we're doing all these things. Again, we're at the bottom of our slide talking about our core tasks and those activities that we've got to do and kind of who is doing it, but you've got to drive all the way back up to why we're here, and it's to achieve decision dominance, right? The operational environment is a singular operational environment with many dimensions. Information dimension is kind of that space that we're in, but it comes down to that commander's ability to have that decision dominance. That can't be stymied because we can't get information to you because it's at the wrong classification. We can't share it with our coalition partners, or whatever the case is, because of some classification or some other issue. We've got to be able to break down some of those barriers, doing it legally and obviously in the correct way in order to do that at speed. It can't be days late if we've got immediacy or issues at the time. All those things, again, we're not going to be able to people our way through this whole thing. Obviously, we're going to have great people working it, but there's a lot of technology. And I think, again, very similar to how I started with the Dream Team, where we have a lot of great capabilities within industry, but trying to bring that together and have that, I'll call it integrator, the integration or orchestration level of the capabilities that we just talked about are key. And I'll say just an ask from my perspective is, as you come back or you approach any one of the core task leaders that we have here, is that we want to make sure that we're sharing that capability across all things so that we all understand that we can have some coherent, shareable information so we all understand, because it has to work across the entire core task in order to achieve that, that condition of information advantage going forward. Okay, so it's kind of an ask at the end is we've got to be able to talk, we've got to be able to share what we're doing across all those things. So, okay, great, thanks team. I'll say next question a little bit, maybe I've got 3 minutes left, so maybe I should just stop right there, but I'll just throw it out, one more if I can. I know I'm probably back on lunch, but if there was one thing we could do to simplify, because we talked a lot about complexity and complication. Is there one thing that any one of you would offer up is how you would wish you could simplify what we're doing? Because we're trying to get a nugget down to a lot of hairy challenges. What we can do forward to simplify some of this complexity?
So I'd say we just need to continue moving from legacy systems, which currently are very often stovepiped, and continue that movement to a common operating environment where we actually can share the way you just talked.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree. Common operating environment, and then COPS that are usable from lowest level up to the general officers in a division or even higher are critical, and that the flow of the information simplified.
I'll just echo that. Add a simple visualization system so we can simply visualize the disinformation.
A combined effort on cross-domain solutions. So as we talk about going from stovepipe networks to data centricity, then we really need to get together and just go all in on cross-domain solutions at various levels in order to bridge that gap.
Okay, thank you. And I won't answer that because I think we hit it pretty well. I'll end with this, kind of where I started with basketball analogy from the Olympics. Mike Krzyzewski. Let me fast forward a few years. Mike Krzyzewski is now the basketball head coach for our Olympic team. Still a bunch of all-stars. Now it's, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and the current Allen Iverson. Again, great individual players. And he saw it the same way that Chuck Daly did, decade and a half earlier, which was these are great individual capabilities. We've got to be able to bring them in as a team. And what Mike Krzyzewski did, again, this is setting the conditions early, just like the coach did, to make sure that we can operate as a team, was he brought in General, now retired, Robert Brown. And he brought him in, and General Brown said, I didn't feel worthy enough to talk to these great, all-stars. And what General Brown did, this was right after he was a striker commander, he brought in some of our Army's wounded warriors. Mm-hmm. And he had the wounded warriors talk to those NBA players about what it means to be on a team and what it means to have selfless service. So I want to make sure that even though I provided some basketball analogies for how to bring 5 core tasks together, everyone recognizes what great teams look like, and the Army is a good example of a freaking great team. So I appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate certainly your attendance and your teaming with us as we work through this and get after information advantage in order to achieve decision dominance. And again, thanks to AFCEA for all they do. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Colonel Mike Warlick, U.S. Marine Corps retired, AFCEA's Vice President for Defense, to the stage.
Good morning, and wasn't that a great presentation by this team? They know what they're talking about, they study it, and they're living it right now. And I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I just came over from the third session with your PMs and PEOs. This is PEO, EIWNS. All 3 of these sessions were really tremendous, and today they talked about information. yesterday they talked about information advantage. So, you know, it's right down there at the PM level, and they're driving this as hard as they can based on the information that they have to move them forward. And they're also looking at your feedback from industry to help get where they're going. So I'd like to, the way I say information advantage, you know, it's going to dramatically impact the future, whether it's a shadow or it's a brick and mortar conflict. And we got to get it right from the start. So I'd like to just say that Brigadier General Kraft, Colonel Fickel, Colonel Perrine, Colonel Pishock, and Jeff Whitskin, I want to thank you for your panel. And I'd like to make two other comments, and I'll say it one time and I'll never say it again. I was a Marine, many of you know that, and I ran the Marine Corps Communications School for officers, and I ran the enlisted class. Officers was at Quantico, enlisted was at 29 Palms. It's all at 29 Palms now. I had a number of Army students that came through our course for lieutenants and captains. And we had classes of 50, and usually the Army count was somewhere around 15 to 17 of that group, along with some international officers. Well, two of them are sitting on the stage right here, and I've mentioned this one before. He's one of my stars, and the other one's sitting right beside him. Another one of the stars. And this week, another individual came up and indicated they were a student. So this is close to home for me when we have an event down here because of the academic piece of what goes on. And now the expansion into the cyber world is just growing dramatically. So again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for the successes that all these folks have had on the stage. Thank you for attending this week. And thank you for being health and safety awareness, because this is going to carry outside of this conference into others, I'm sure. We want to be back here again next year. So you're going to move to lunch right now. We've got a nice lunch break. You're going to come back and you're going to hear General Barrett talk about NetCom. That's going to be a great session. And then we're going to have General Stanton come up with General Shea, and they'll close the event. So enjoy your lunch. Thanks for being here, and look forward to talking to you.